Okay, welcome everyone to this episode of the FuReel Podcast. On the podcast, we talk about what we experience whilst we're teaching and practicing Kung Fu and Tai Chi, and the three parts that make us whole: the mind, the body, the spirit. Here next to me, as always, is Sifu Gawain, founder and master of Jhung Academy, also known as my father, and seeing Brian is on the episode today as well. If you've been listening to the podcast, he's been in the past 3 to 4. Is that right? 3 to 4 guys podcasts talking about our experience in training together, memories and stuff like that. So let's get this episode started. Welcome everyone. Hello.
Good evening. Oh, good afternoon.
Or good morning.
No, it's not morning. It's not morning. Surely it's not morning.
Yeah, but it could be for someone who's listening.
Oh, yeah, true. Yeah, exactly.
All right. Yeah, exactly. All right, so we're here at the studio on Sundays. If I draw you guys a picture, if you follow Jhung Academy's content, actually, no, you probably won't see this stuff, but we're at this studio. If you're watching this podcast on our YouTube channel, we're at the studio here where Dad and I are at. We film our on-demand content here with senior instructors and camera crew and stuff like that. And just yesterday we were filming, and then we finished and we're outside talking about life and how stress affects us and things we've noticed in students when being through isolation, which we have just been through. And now we're first week back into our face-to-face classes. It's our second lesson today that happened face-to-face. So yeah, let's kick off this conversation. I think it would be cool if we had this conversation online, because we talked about some pretty important stuff, didn't we?
Yeah, true. We were. And I just want to acknowledge that we're not actually through COVID-19. We're just in the next phase, phase 3 or 4. And an interesting thing that there were some parents who we were talking about all of this on Saturday. And one of the parents did point out that we're counting up phase 1, 2, 3, 4, so that if need be, the government can introduce further phases. So we're not counting down.
Wow.
And I thought, that's actually a very good point. We're counting up, which means it could be endless. Could actually just continue. And that's a scary thought, because there's an awful lot of fallout already that I witness within my small circle of Ging mowers and family and friends from the effects of COVID. And thankfully nobody that I know has been directly affected by COVID in wellness, like infected with COVID. But still, the effect is there. Like, this amount of stress, high stress levels exist out there.
Sorry, it's a new phone. I just worked it out how to mute it. How dare they call me when I'm on a podcast?
I'm leaving that in.
Sorry, Sifu, my phone interrupted you.
No, that's all right. I was just that reflection, really, that we're counting up, which means it is endless, and that's an interesting way of looking at it.
It is,
rather than
technical difficulties.
Okay, so I don't know how to mute it. So what I've done is turn the volume down to 1. So when they do call, you just can't even hear it ring. There we go.
Okay, cool.
Try that again.
Yeah.
That's I didn't even think about that, Sifu, about the stages, and that, going up means that there could be the stage 5, 6, and I think the unknown is, if you think too much about it, it can probably add to people's stress and anxiety levels, because you could get lost in the oh my goodness, this could be 10, 15, 20. What does that look like? You know, how long is that going to be? You know, people are really wanting to get back to how it was, as close as how it was before this all happened.
True. I wonder though, what are the things that we'd really want to get back to, like being quite specific, and just listening to some of our Jing rowers from Saturday. Like what I was noticing yet again this morning was the first thing everyone wants to do when we're at Leadable Town Hall is just reconnect, talk to each other, rekindle the relationships, be in each other's space, and reconnect. There wasn't like this mad rush to, we have to go exercise, we have to go do our training, but it was just, let's just be in the same space as each other to start with. So, you know, a good 15, 20 minutes of the beginning of class was just standing around talking. And one of the things that I heard from some of the parents was, well, actually, it's quite unanimous from the parents, and that is that they're having the restrictions meant that they needed to be, and I agree, I'll say we because it includes me, we need to be very mindful about how much time we invest in things. And, you know, speaking from my experience, I know prior to the COVID restrictions, I never thought twice about filling my days, nor filling my weeks. As a matter of fact, when someone asked me to get involved with something, the answer was immediately, yes, let me find the space. And there was no consultation internal, like within myself, nor with my wife and family about how this is going to work and how it's going to affect everyone. It was just like, well, if someone's inviting me to something or giving us an opportunity to do something, we should just do it. And it's only short term. It's only once off, or, you know, whatever it happens to be, or it's only an hour a month, or however it happens to kind of roll out. But what it actually ultimately meant was that we were jam-packed. Like our lives were absolutely jam-packed, and there was no space to slow down or to be quiet. And since being at home in our restrictions through phase 2 and phase 1, we've spent a lot of time together doing very little apart from just being in each other's space and just being, which allowed me at time to think. Like I actually got a chance to contemplate and sleep in. Like I couldn't believe it really, because prior to the COVID restrictions, 5 out of 7 days of the week, I was up at 5 and there was a class to go to. And that was a lot. Like I can still remember having those times where I had to pull over on the road and have a sleep before I kept driving, because I could feel myself nodding off, and it's, no, I've actually got to have a sleep. I've got to be able to get home. This is not good. And always feeling tired. Then we've been at home for the last 2 phases. I was at 9 weeks now. This is beginning of week 10. And realizing, like Matt was saying, Matt who was sharing on Saturday, was saying that he and his family, and they only have one son, himself, and also have Rory. And Rory does play Fu, and Matt and Elsa do Tai Chi with me. And what Matt said was that they, as a family unit, are very considerate of each other's time now and mindful about what they use that time for. So they're very, very directed about the investment from a family's perspective, because once one person's out doing something, and particularly for them, Rory's in primary school, so it means one parent's gone with him, instantly everyone's apart, and they really liked being together in each other's space. So I have the same feeling. You know, it's really hard well, I certainly am conscious about not repeating the same old cycle of filling every day and filling every day within every week, and then having a year that goes past where my only measure is how busy I was. It's really not very healthy. So that's been a positive thing for me that's come out of the COVID restrictions. And the interesting thing, like what you guys were saying on Sunday, was that the whole world had the same situation at the very same time. So it's not like we missed out, isn't it? You guys were talking about like having holidays wasn't really holidays because someone else was doing your job, and when you came back, you'd take over, and the stresses were there, and you only had 2 weeks leave accrued. So, and you were still in touch and on the phone. Emails are still coming.
Yeah, well, that's a common saying. Hey, when people go on holidays, it's like, I need a holiday from the holiday, because you spend a week getting into holiday mode, and then spend a week or the few last days of holiday getting ready for coming back to work mode, and it doesn't really feel like a holiday. Whereas this period of like 9 to 10 weeks in Perth, at least, was everyone was in the same boat. So when we were asked to go home, there was no stress or pressure from work to having complete a task or start on a project, or when the week before you come back, you make sure you're ready for the A, B, and C sort of thing. But it's been quite nice from our point of view.
Yeah, great.
One thing you touched based on, Dad, was that your energy levels, and that was a big thing for me. Like I was struggling towards end of last year. The start of the year was all right because it came from Christmas break and stuff like that. And it's funny how I get, or maybe I get into a mindset of when we're in the routine of doing our work, our classes or whatever, that gets automated. And then if I question, why am I so tired? Like, do I need more sleep? Do I need more food? Do I need coffee? Like all those little injections that you can take in between the day to keep you going, can be almost a bad routine as well, because maybe what we really need is some space and some time to be quiet, rather than fill it up with so many calendar events and then feeling like you're wrong for wanting to have a break because you have to keep going with the work routine and stuff like that. And you go, well, what's wrong? Like he's still going. Why shouldn't I be still going? But I feel really tired. I should feel like I need more sleep. But if I'd have more sleep, then I can't be at that, and you get into that cycle of guilt, maybe even, for not holding up your pillar. But because we fill our calendars with everything, we get into that sort of cycle. And that's what I've noticed. And in the last, I reckon this year, I made a conscious effort of getting just more sleep. Something had to change. So something I could control was my sleep pattern. And I got personally more than 6 hours sleep. So I was getting the 7.5 to 8, and it made a world of difference, where I didn't feel like I had to pull over the side of the road, like Dad said, and have a nap, because my energy levels, my body was feeling much better from having more sleep. And for me, it sounds like a simple equation: get more sleep, get more energy. But sometimes we shove so many things in that we go, oh no, if I just want to watch this show for an extra hour because I like it, and then you get that less hour of sleep, and then pay for it the next day, sort of thing, and you get into a big cycle. So rest has been a real big noticing for me, and how I function every day. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
And
So
also,
what about yourself?
Yeah.
What about yourself, seeing Brian?
Yeah, it's I definitely can relate to what you said in that respects, particularly in the space of filling my days, and you know, the onset of COVID, you know, was a bit crazy for everyone, and for my business, with such a big business, closing down, all the staff being affected. It was there was other committees that I had filled any downtime I've had in my life with. You know, I did it for the reasons of maybe not so much just being busy, but you know, trying to contribute to as many things as possible that I feel I could have, you know, a positive contribution to and was passionate about. But when COVID was so busy and consuming us from a response down to as a business called a hibernation perspective, a lot of those committees, I just said, look, I just haven't got the time to put any effort into this at the moment. But what it's allowed me to do is reflect on that and go, well, wait a minute, actually moving forward, I just, it's not healthy to sustain that broad engagement, the committee engagement. So I sort of selected where I thought, where I wanted to still contribute, where the hours weren't too much, or the workload wasn't too unbearable, and you know, the other committees, I'd been on them with a fair period of time, a number of years, put a lot of work into it, and they're in a strong position to continue without me, and someone else can step up and take leadership roles. But you know, I think COVID gave me that time. Otherwise, I don't know what would have happened. I don't know what would have took for me to change, because even Val, you know, my wife would, you know, she could say to me, you know, you're doing too much. You need to back down. You never rest. Your mind is always active. You're always on your phone. And I wouldn't listen, you know, being stubborn as I am. It's like, no, I know what my calendars are. I know what I can do. I know I can deal with this. I can deal with that. You know, it's all good. Don't worry about it. I can do it. And that wasn't being honest with myself, really. You know, she's the one that's objectively can sit back, and she's the one that can observe, because I wasn't taking the time to actually, or didn't have the time, arguably, to sit down in stillness and just observe myself and reflect. I didn't give myself that time where she could see what was eating me up and what was stressing me, and I couldn't sleep properly and getting up in the middle of the night with insomnia. And it was all of that. So what I just need to be conscious with now is that as we start to ramp back up, you know, as to what I commit myself to and what I don't. And I've just got to be really conscious with not, you know, because at times people will call you and say, hey, look, we'd really want you to be a part of this or be a part of that. Can you assist? I've just got to, you know, if I do accept a committee, I'm going to have to give up another one. You know, I'm just going to have to work out what the priorities are there, because I just can't allow myself to take on what I did before, because it's not healthy for me. It's not good for me. And if it's not good for me, then it's going to rub too. You know, if I'm too stressed and, you know, too in the head, too sad, mad, too stressed, you know, that's not good, again, for me, but for others that I associate with, and I don't want them to be to feel those effects.
Yeah, that's another thing that I've noticed as well. When we are stretched so far apart like that, it's like I don't have the space to really think like creatively or open-mindedly, or be a nice person. I'm quite grumpy and like tunnel vision, because I've only got space for this calendar and this timetable and this task, and anything else that comes in, it's like gets rejected, and I'm not really nice to people, and I'm not nice to myself, and you know, you get to that vicious cycle as well. And yeah.
Yeah, so things are changing now, and we've had our first 2 face-to-face classes. We also had 2 Zoom classes here this morning, and what I'm noticing is that there's there's a real craving for us to be face to face, and I think that's a really healthy thing, because we relate to each other when we're in each other's space and interacting, and we get to share space together, which is a whole lot different to being on the screen. But I noticed that there was a big difference in me this morning that is quite different to when I'm on the screen, and it's the tiredness levels. And I wonder what that is. And I remember briefly reading something that CMO posted through about Zoom fatigue, or well, not Zoom fatigue, but screen fatigue. So when we are on screens talking with each other, there's this constant having to watch every face on the screen, and it creates a whole lot of fatigue. And it seems to be quite different when we're face to face. It's not the same. Like, we get tired, like Saturday after class on Saturday, I was exhausted because it's like back to back. And but it's a different exhaustion. It's not up here. It's more of a, my body is tired, as opposed to my head is tired. So I wonder sometimes, like how much we put on ourselves, and we're listening to people's wellness, and I don't know, maybe you find the same thing, Brian. There seems to be, as we get older, we are I guess knowing more and more people who are dying, who are passing away. But the dying thing, of course, is normal. But I just wonder about the amount of cancer that's around. Like, there's a lot of it. And I'm not sure whether it's just because I'm getting older and people are living longer and therefore dying of cancer more often. But gee whiz, there seems to be a lot of it. And I'm absolutely certain anecdotally that stress is not good for our body. I know there's a lot of science, a lot of study out there, and in the background of Chinese medicine too, but all of the study and all of the data is one thing, but actually feeling it in our own bodies is quite something else. And I don't like the feeling. Like, how do we have a balance? How do we balance being able to work and generate enough to sustain our family without having to work so much to be able to just, pay off the mortgage in time and stuff like that, isn't it? Because there's a real cycle.
Yeah, I've got to say, for the past sort of 2 months, I've technically been working 3 days, have 4 days off, but those 3 days of work have been not back-to-back meetings, not high demand. And look, in my my 4 days off, I'm still lately the number of weeks filming on Sunday mornings, or still doing training on the evenings. So there's enough there to keep me sort of active. But I've actually been really enjoying the ability to this work 3 days, or work 4 days, still be able to pay the mortgage and get a few days off, because it allows you that time to do things even for yourself that you just wouldn't have done before, and to offset some of the stress that's around, because I think before is my cortisol levels we're at the point where I call it the cup runneth over, so the full cup of water, and it's bubbling over the top, and consistently. And I'm when I speak to people, or for sort of naturopath, it's where you need to bring those cortisol levels down. It's like, yeah, but how? There's meditation, or I can reflect back on some qigong practices, or I can listen to music, and it's like, but what time do I have to do that? So again, well, it's my daily practice, because there's always an excuse to say I can't do it, I can't fit it in. But even if I could have given myself, or I can give myself, even if it's 10 minutes, even if it's 15 minutes of just sitting in some sort of degree of calmness, when everyone's in bed, I go at the back. When everyone's in bed in the morning, I go out early in the morning and just sit, or whether I, do something from a movement perspective. There is, you have to give yourself that time. And I think there's many people that go, yeah, I know what you're talking about, because I should give myself that time, but I keep making excuses for it. but we know that the more that we give ourselves that time, the better we feel after it.
Yeah.
We know life isn't going to get any easier. It's never going to be an easy path. We'll have periods of the waters are smooth, and then we'll have storms and tsunamis, and then before the water calms again. So we've got to take those opportunities to just put the body in some degree of balance for when it gets challenged, and then be able to reset again, instead of always being in stormy, rocky waters. Because I was reflecting on this after our conversation on Sunday, and thinking that I'm sure in our creation, we're not in ideal circumstances a negative being. And I think we not like being negative. I don't think we like being surrounded by negativity. And when we are, that impacts us. And you can, as you said, Sifu, the science in that shows that the body reacts in certain ways to stress, the fight or flight. And it's not always good to be in those stress situations because of that negative effect it has physically, but also that negative effect it has mentally. And then the flow on, you just, you can feel that brokenness even from a spiritual perspective in the poorer periods. So, and this is where we're talking about on Sunday about, the media, and it's really easy to get your head down in the phone, watching what's going on and, what other people are saying and doing on Facebook or Instagram or other forms of social media or mainstream media. And it really, there's a fair bit of it, particularly in mainstream, that projects a lot of things negative, hate, distrust, prejudice, a lot of bad things, and we absorb that. Our minds take it in, we absorb some of that negative energy. And then I was thinking about what's happening in the US, and now some of it's flying over to Australia, and the media will make you feel that it's the majority that are lashing out and rioting. It's the majority that feel that there's no hope and that the world is full of racism and hatred, when it's not actually factual. But that doesn't sell stories. So it's I've turned myself off mainstream media because I'm not going to allow those outside influences to. You get enough on your plate on a day-to-day basis in your own lives, let alone and as you said, Sifu, through SEMO, friends of yours, that are battling illnesses and cancer, and others that have passed, and some have young children, and that's enough, let alone dealing with foreign entities, another part of the world that's going to have no influence on your day-to-day life.
Yeah, I agree. There is enough. There's plenty of stresses to grab our attention. It doesn't mean that what's happening overseas is unimportant, or that is not relative, but it's like, how much more can we take? And I find that it pulls me back to the conversation of, what do I do for myself that helps me deal with what, like the rocky. You go out in the ocean, and as the swell builds, the boat starts to move in the water. And for me, my practice is what keeps me still. So it's like a keel, and it helps me ride through the rough waters. It's interesting this morning listening to some of the Jingmoers talk about how much they've missed being in face-to-face, and listening to the challenges they had coming to the Zoom classes. Not everybody, it wasn't a fit for everyone, but those who came benefited enormously from the experience. And I too was surprised with how useful the Zoom classes were. Like, people just didn't turn up to exercise, they were actually learning new things and progressing forward. But what I could hear this morning was particularly, like Brad was talking about, how he set out to do his daily practice, but then there were so many other things that were more important, and therefore he would delay the practice for the afternoon. So I won't do it in the morning, I'll do it in the afternoon. And then you get to the afternoon and there's more important things, so then I'll do it at night. And then when you don't do it at night, then you get really angry with yourself because you haven't done it at all. Then it becomes a sort of this downward spiral of, well, when am I ever going to do it? And he's made one comment which then made me realize that there's actually something really valuable here in his sharing. And he said, I'm actually practicing all the time because we have very large mirrors at home. And whenever I'm in front of the mirror, I'll be doing my movements and my techniques to hone my skills. He says, but it's not the same as being here face to face. And I thought, yes, you're right. Absolutely. It's not the same. But I could hear also that there was this disappointment he had with himself, that even though he practiced at home, he was missing something. And then it made me realize that we spoke of these 3 words in one of our early podcasts in the early episodes in season 1, where we discovered that there is practice, there is training, and there is study. So we practice our craft singly by ourselves, we train our craft with others, and then we're studying. So practice is by myself, training is with others, and study happens all the time. And that when I was able to distinguish those 3, do you remember that, Jhung, when we discovered
the episode was called Practice versus Training, I think, or
okay,
or Practice versus Study, or something like that. So
yeah,
it was like episode 4 or something of season 1. Yeah.
So anyway, when we discovered that distinction, it made it very easy for me to practice, simply because the distinction is that I'm not trying to replicate training through practice. Right. So if I set out to replicate or to replace my training with practice, I will set myself up for disappointment, because one key element that's missing is a training partner. So there's no way I can actually replicate, replace, or copy or duplicate a training class because I don't have a training partner. So instantly it puts me in the right frame of mind. It's like, well, no, practice is actually quite different to training. Training is something I do with others. Practice is something I do by myself, and I must do it by myself. That is the nature of doing practice. I am doing it by myself. And then Brad and Paul said, they would get together to do some training because they were neighbors. And they said, but, then we'd get distracted because we'd check out a couple of YouTubes to see how everyone else is doing these drills or these usages. And then before we know it, an hour had passed and we hadn't done anything physical. And we'd watched a couple of YouTubes and we thought, oh, now our time's gone, right? And they got disappointed with that. And I said, well, actually, you were studying. You just weren't practicing or training. You were studying. So when you know that, then it takes the pressure away from having to, once again, replicate something that you've been missing. And then you can put time aside to study. You put time aside and you can send each other video links and say, check this out before we get together for our training. We can talk about, we can review these vids for the first 10, 15 minutes because we've already seen them, and come with something. And then you can do your training thereafter for the next 45 minutes, So it was quite valuable today seeing that and noticing that once we kind of all got the idea that there are 3 phases, there's the practice, the training, and then the study. With those 3 phases, it actually means that we can make better use of our time and also satisfaction from engaging with those engaging purposefully with what is the outcome I'm working towards here. Am I studying? Because there's a study outcome. Am I practicing? Is a practice outcome, or am I training? There's a training outcome. It's quite different. But everyone agreed that it's what holds us. Otherwise, we have potentially have a downward spiral into a deep, dark hole where it could be really hard to get ourselves out of because of all of the pressures that exist.
Can we Dad, you mentioned a few things. Can we touch base on I think you said it's in Brian as well, and you sharing, Dad, about Brad's sharing about Brad's sharing, where that fine line between knowing our practice is good for us and prioritizing that time, but because there are some other, like you were saying with Brad, there were some other tasks that were more important for that time, then you keep pushing your practice forward in the day, and then by the time you reach to past dinner time and shower or whatever you do at night, then it's like, oh, it's time for bed. Okay, and now I feel really disappointed because I ran out of time today. There's that fine line where we know it's good for us, but we, fall into that pattern of pushing it forward, if you like. Can we talk about what you guys notice in your body before your practice? So what kind of sensations or distractions or clouded mind, whatever it may be, what you notice in the body before, and then why you know the practice is good for you after your practice, and what do you feel in your body after your practice that makes you practice, right? So does that question make sense? Let's see who's doing this.
Yeah, makes sense to me. You go first thing, Brian.
Thanks, Sifu. That made sense to me too. So that's two of us. But for me, if I don't practice, if I do something where my bodies feel like it's being activated, I will, I'll get down on myself and feel that I've cheated myself. I should have done it. I'm going to do it tomorrow. And if I don't, again, now I've got to say I'm pretty good at trying to be active. What I reflect on more is trying to keep that in check and not overdoing that. So again, trying to find those balances. But lately, just reflecting on my training, particularly Thursday nights on Zoom, I'd been mentioning that on reflection, a lot of mad sad, and I can't necessarily put my finger on why I was in that space, but I think it was probably this transitional period going, well, I've actually been enjoying a lot of aspects of being at home with the family more and doing things around the house and stressing a little bit less, and even though it's exciting to move back into a period where I can get back into the workspace and get back into training, and I don't know, there was just something that was putting me in that mindset. But when I trained, and even the body going into training, I do the Zoom predominantly at the back of late. It's cold, but I feel like I've got my space out there. The body, because it's at night, and traditionally, apart from Tuesdays when I instruct, when I do my belt classes, it's mornings. I'm usually pretty good at it as a morning person. The body just felt tired. The mind didn't feel right. But when we came to Zoom class and we started on combinations, I just tried to, for that period of time, just commit fully to the craft and to what I wanted to do, even just focusing on the technique without the combination, and then moving to the more dynamic usages, etc. And by the end, it just must have been, I put it down to maybe the release of endorphins. It was something where at the end, I feel that I was out of my head and more in the body. I felt really happy with myself that I trained, you got to bed in a much, much better headspace, and then that helps fuel you for the next week. So the next time it comes up, it's really easy to go, it's cold, I'm tired, my head's not in the right space. Maybe I'll just train by myself at the back. Maybe I'll just do some rings by myself, and maybe I'll just put some headphones on and do something. But then I reflect on, but wait a minute, remember last week what you get out of it? You felt the same way, but you still trained, and then look at how you felt at the end. And that sort of, helped continue to recharge me week on week to get online and to do my training.
Yeah, I agree. Actually, this morning we were kind of unpacking this. What do we get from our practice? And Brad did say, and it was really hard. It was probably easier in the first few weeks, but much harder as time went on, as the pressure of the COVID restrictions really started to roll and gather momentum. But what we spoke about this morning was what I've noticed, and I wouldn't have noticed this if you asked me the same question 3-4 years ago. I would not be giving you the same answer as I'm about to, and that is, since having started daily practice, and just by coincidence or by design, working towards 100 Yulus a week for 100 weeks, that was my first goal. So do 10,000 Yulus back to back, day after day, and see what happens. And the anecdotal statement in Tai Chi is that your body will move differently and will never move the same again. So that's what really interested me. It's like, oh wow, you know, like, is my choir really going to open? Am I going to start floating on air? You know. So obviously not, because I'm now approaching 20,000 and I still can't do any of those things. But what I did actually get was something that was totally left field, totally not what I expected. And that was, I call it my resiliency cup. So it's 20 Yulus a day, every day for 100 weeks. And that gets you to 10,000. What I discovered was that there are days where I didn't want to do it. And there are lots of them, like lots and lots of them, lots of times where I just didn't want to do it. And I reckon in the first 20 weeks, it would happen several times a week for the first 20 weeks. And if anyone's out there listening and wants to do this, I'm about to, thanks to Tarrant, I've been considering starting a support group for people who want to challenge themselves to a daily practice, but at a level that is just outside of their comfort zone. Right? We can all do something like well within our comfort zone, but I don't know whether we'll find the same benefits or not. So if anyone's out there wanting to go beyond their comfort zone, I'm very happy to share my insight, because I can tell you it's bloody hard work to do 20 Yulus a day, every day for 100 weeks. So in the first 20 weeks, what I discovered was there are lots of days, and I was surprised. I thought I was a pretty determined type of guy. I think quite high in myself most of the times. But I was surprised. It's like, wow, holy shit, I really don't want to do this. Oh, what does that mean? Does that mean I'm not that committed? Does that mean I'm not really good at what I do? Does that mean I don't walk the talk? Like, what, you know, there was a whole lot of questioning that I went through in the first 20 weeks. And the flip side to it was, thankfully, I didn't stop. But what I did discover was, by not stopping, there was something that was like a pot of gold, like a treasure that I had no idea existed. And this treasure actually is the joy that comes from fulfilling the promise to myself. So every time I went out to practice, at those times where I didn't have the energy, I didn't feel like it, I wanted to do something else, I wanted to be with the rest of the family, I wanted to do this, I wanted to do that, whatever it happened to be, or just wanted to go to bed, and I practiced. When I finished, there was a real sense of satisfaction, and that satisfaction went into this cup. I didn't realize it, but it went into this cup. This cup is what I call my resiliency cup. And it was kind of like, after a while, it was kind of like a bank account. Every time I practiced, when I didn't want to practice, I deposited into my resiliency bank account. And so it got built up, and it's just like a bank account. It built up so that when I needed to draw on it, I had plenty to go. Right? So what I was sharing this morning in class was this realization that I've gained over the last, I think it's week 121, 122, something like that, through daily practice, particularly which comes from the moments where I don't want to practice. Like, we can all do it, our practice, when we really want to, right? I'm not talking about those times. I'm actually talking about those times when we don't want to. It then taps into another part of, it reveals this other part of daily practice that is a benefit that is really hard to articulate unless you've actually been there, right? So you and I, we can measure, say, for example, if we did bench presses every day, we could say, before we started, this machine measured our strength at this level, and after 60 days, we'll be able to bench press this much. So therefore, we've grown, right? So you can actually see that there's this actual movement in our ability, so it's measurable. But what I'm talking about, you can't measure it with a machine. You can only feel it within oneself. And you can only recognize it and appreciate it once you get there. You can't even see it when it's happening, right? Because it's like, you know, you've probably had, or your kids have had bank accounts, right, where they're depositing $1 every week, and doesn't look like very much after a year. And I think, oh, I only got $50 after a year. Well, you know, just keep going. You'll be right. You know, the interest rate will grow and all the rest of it. And then after several years, it's like goes up like that. It's kind of like that for me. So now, having gone through that experience, well, I'm still going through it, but having now realized what happened, that I had no idea would happen, because I'm expecting magic to happen with my qua, and my shoulders will open, and I'll have this rubbery body, and, you know, all that sort of stuff. You know, I was looking for those measurable things, like I'll never get pushed over, and people come up to me and I just go, and I'll fall over. You know, mind you, none of that's ever happened. You know, I was expecting that. No. What really happens with practice is something that is that quietly happens in the background, that has this monumental effect on our experience of the world, that completely transforms the way we see things. Completely. Now, look, I'm not saying that I don't have bad days. I do. I'm not saying that I have the answer for every problem that I'm faced with. I don't have any. But what I am saying is, the resilience for me is the ability to get back up after you fall over. Resilience is not falling over. And daily practice helps me get up after I fall over. And I think that's what's really important to note about spending time and following through on the promise we have to ourselves through daily practice. Because it's those moments that we fall over, that we don't want to get back up, that's when it's going to be really valuable. You know, it's not going to stop us from falling over at all, not at all. Life happens, shit happens, you know, and we're human, every single one of us. I'm just another guy. It's just that I've been doing this a long time, that's all. Doesn't make me any different. That's my, you know, that's my pot of gold at the end of my rainbow through daily practice.
No.
Yeah.
That's where we have crickets.
Yeah.
Is that magic
great?
button?
Yeah, really great. To answer my own question, I guess more recently we're doing everything from home. Seeing Brian, you talked about activating the body, and that really clicked for me, because it feels like that when I practice. So when I haven't practiced or don't practice, it does feel like my body isn't activated, and it feels all clunky and it feels all tight, and you know, that's the body. The emotions, I'm quite negative on myself, and the mindset's quite negative, and everything feels like it's going a bit downhill before I practice. And I do notice this because I journal every time I practice as well. So I just reflect quickly after I practice and then write down what I've noticed. And as soon as I've finished practicing, oh, actually, sometimes it's halfway through where I feel like, I'm awake, like my body is activated. Or sometimes at the very end, it's like, I feel like I have activated now, and my body feels all awake and loosened up, and the juices are flowing, and the endorphins have been released. My mindset's clearer. I feel clear in my mind. I can think more than one thought. I can multitask, and everything just feels more positive from that point. Then I write that down, and then I go about my day. And when I practice in the morning, then the rest of my day is quite productive, and I feel more awake to the day, if you like. Whereas if I postpone my practice to the afternoon because I feel like this task is more valuable than my well-being, then I'm running low on that day, if that makes sense. Like I think of, it's played like fighting games and stuff, the health bar. I feel like my health bar is really low if I don't practice. And the more I practice, the more health I have in my bar, and it regenerates me, and adding to my cups that we've been talking about today. And yeah, it's like, it's not measurable. I can just notice the difference in myself. And the only thing that I think I can use to measure it is writing it down as a journal afterwards. And I don't even know how to describe it any more than that. But there's a big difference to me. And I feel more productive, feel more awake, feel more activated. Just feel more overall more positive after some practice. That's it. That's what I noticed.
Cool.
It'd be interesting. We should get a Ging mower who does other form of exercise. I think Leif runs. He's a half marathon runner. Leif, Sifu, Dad.
Yeah,
Leif.
Yeah, he is. Yeah.
It'd be interesting to see. Yeah, it'd be interesting to see what he gets from his running. Do you know what I mean? And compare the exercises, because I'm sure it's not just martial arts or Kung Fu and Tai Chi. It's got to be like, cyclists or anything that really has to channel all of their selves into that activity. Swimming, do you know what I'm talking about? Music, all these sorts of crafts, because they're all the same, really, aren't they? Crafts.
Well, I don't know. I don't run very well, nor do I swim very well. So
it's probably I mean, if I think about it, for the period when I wasn't training at the academy, I mean, for about 5 or 6 years, I was, doing triathlons, and I was training 6 to 7 days a week, such that my wife said she never sees me anymore. But that was a problem because I was too determined on focusing on the next triathlon, and it's multidiscipline. So, you know how much it. So it's quite a conundrum. But you're swimming, you're running, you're cycling. So you got 3 disciplines, and sometimes I'm training, twice a day for 6 days straight, watching nutrition. But it's really quite interesting because at the end, let's say it's your practice, whether it's the actual triathlon or whether it's swimming in the pool for a K in the morning or going for a 100K bike ride or whatever the run is, it's easy to go, I'm just going to do a 2.5K run instead of 5K run because I just don't feel up to it. But you know that you're going to hurt more at the end or your times are going to be poor when you get to the triathlon, and the result won't be as sweet because you're going to know, you're going to reflect and go, well, actually, I cheated myself a little bit there. I could have, I did the 2.5 instead of the 5. I did the 500 meter swim instead of a K. I did this. I did that. I found shortcuts, and yes, I still might be happy that I completed, and there's not there's a lot of people that don't do tries, but I could have done better. And I didn't want to be in that. I don't want to be in that space. I want to be in a space where I can reflect upon it. It's just like the kids at school. I mean, my oldest has, a couple of 2-3 hour exams today, politics and law and mathematics. And I was saying to her last night, it is what the result is. It is what it is. Or you can reflect upon whatever that result is, in knowing yourself that you gave it all you got. Like, you have been studying just consistently and putting so many other things aside, because this is a priority at the moment when the exams are coming up. So whatever the result is, even if it's not as good as what you want it to be, if it is great, if it's not, you put the effort in. You didn't cut corners. You didn't cheat yourself. And that has got to, hopefully, I'm sure she'll score well. She's pretty academic, but if she didn't, that she still is able to, maybe with that resilience, go, well, I gave it all I got, and I sought, other people, the tutors in maths to help me, get through some of these problem solving. So it wasn't as if, probably what I did at schooling, which is probably the complete opposite. But she actually applied herself to it and got the results. And from a triathlon perspective, yeah, I mean, it used to be devastating when you would do an injury, in your training. I'd be right up close to a try. I'd been training for months, and all of a sudden I get a small calf tear, and then that's going to affect my ability to compete or otherwise. And even I was looking at, even during the triathlons, and I was reading a lot of triathlon magazines during this period and looking at even the most elite. There's one of the guys who was an Australian, I can't remember his name, but he's won 6 World Ironman championships now. An Ironman is a 3.8K swim followed by a 180K ride and then a marathon. So, and these guys are doing it under 10 hours, somewhere 8.5 hours that they're doing. And he said that the amount of times that he was, in the middle of the try, and his mind would be telling him to, oh, that's a bit sore, that leg, or you're a bit tired, you're a bit, and trying to find ways to get out of it, to feign an injury or to back off because, oh, wait a minute, my heart's going too quick here, maybe I need to, whatever it might have been. There was distractions with the mind. So he knew that he kept reflecting, oh, wait a minute, I've put the time and the effort into this, my body can do this, I know it can do it, and he would get through it. But this is a world champion 6 times over, which is no easy feat. And the amount of times in triathlons, I'd be the same thing going, oh my goodness, I'm absolutely exhausted. I just, maybe I might feign that injury or maybe whatever it might be and just continue to push through. But at the end, there's a great sense of achievement. And you know what, I was talking to a guy recently that's trying to get into triathlons, and I was talking about my sharings, my experiences with it. And I said, it's not so much, there is one thing from an individual perspective, but it's also the collective. So every other person there was, for whatever they were doing triathlons, everyone's got their own story, but they had achieved something at the end. And there was many people that I'd never met before, a couple of new faces where you just smile and say hi because you knew each other from other triathlons. But there was this real sense of collective achievement at the end because we had shared something together. And I think that can be the same with the academy. I mean, the amount of times we reflect at the end of class, and there's some of the students that say, well, at the start I was mad sad, or I barely glad. And in the end, it's like, I'm really happy I came in, because and the other group, most people in the group share the same sentiment, because I know there's something about being together and achieving something, not just as an individual, but as a collective, that just helps even that little bit more.
Definitely.
Yeah, that is interesting to hear. I wonder whether, though, and it'd be interesting to hear from others, like you're saying, Jhung, we invite others to come and chat about their other forms of daily practice, and to see what elements crossover. Like, what are the things that do crossover? Like you're saying with the triathlons, seeing Brian, and what I'm hearing there is, it's the one of the things there is that it's something that you have to work hard to be able to achieve. So it's beyond the normal realms of fitness to be able to complete a triathlon at a competitive level. And because of that challenge, we have to work hard at conditioning the body to be able to achieve that at a competitive level. And that's where we have to give. There's got to be change that happens in the body. I'm hearing words like change. I'm hearing pain. I'm hearing evolution. The body has to evolve. It goes through this evolution of being like its normal self, and then work through to be able to do the number of kilometers and the number of kilometers in the swim and the number of kilometers in the marathon. That takes time. It can't just happen like that. You can't just train once and you're ready. So, maybe that's one of the things that dictates what is a daily practice. There has to be some insurmountable challenge to be able to overcome, something that we can't just overcome in a shorter space of time. There needs to be an investment in time, and that the change will hurt. There will be a pain in all of that. So, that'd be interesting.
Yeah.
To hear.
All right, guys, we've reached our hour. Well, just past it actually. Shall we wrap up the podcast? Yeah.
Sure.
Okay. Well, any last words before we end around practice, around life?
Well, what I've got for myself today, throughout the whole day up until this point, is the question that I have for myself is maintaining the balance. How do I maintain my balance of work and life so that I'm not pushed, overbalanced in any one area, to find that happy medium where I can stand on both feet and from time to time stand on one foot more than the other, rather than I've gone so far down to one side that it's not even possible to counterbalance myself. And for me, it's like that, like work, life. You've got to be able to jump from side to side, but also have enough to be able to come back to center myself. So that's what I've got for myself, is that continual question.
Cool. Brian, any final words?
Yeah, I ditto there with Sifu. I'm very much in the same space, and what I've got from our conversation, and also something I've been reflecting on over the past 3 months in particular. And the other thing with is that being okay with being still. My wife mentioned to me recently, or Val, sorry, I'm saying wife because of the podcasters that don't know it, but Val, said to me recently, I think it was last week, is it's okay to not do anything every now and again. So I might have done my work, I might have done my practice, I might have done a whole range of things, but it's okay to be still. It's okay just to take time out and be okay with doing nothing. Because when you think about it, I'm probably not doing anything because, it's not that I'm not doing nothing, because I did do this. I think it was Friday last week. I took the time to sit out the back and watch the trees. There was a slight breeze, and just take in the clouds and take in the birds flying by, and just take in, nature, and breathe and be calm. And it gave me the opportunity to do a little bit more actually reflection. So it wasn't something physical, but it was something more mental and spiritual. And because before COVID, and her saying that made me think again. I wasn't okay with being still. I wasn't okay with not doing anything. I felt that I was unproductive, and I was letting someone down. Could be doing something to help someone or do something for myself. It was, but this is one of the learnings that's come for me, and I just need to, just like balance, is think about this and be conscious of it as we move, forward, and we move into greater stages of relaxations and recovery.
Yep. Very good. I was going to maybe pop another idea, but let's wrap it up, hey? All right. Thanks, guys, for joining the episode of the podcast. Everyone, that is the end of this episode. Thank you so much for listening again. Or you can watch the full episode on our YouTube channel, of course, FuReel TV. But until next time, we'll see you on the next podcast. Thank you.
Thanks for joining us, Brian, again. Thank you.
Pleasure. No, thank you. I really enjoy conversation and reflection. And I think the great podcast is there'll be many other people listening that'll take something out of it and go, oh yeah, no, I'm in the same boat there, or if they've experienced the same things, or even if they haven't experienced it yet, particularly some of the younger ones that might dial in when they do experience it, some of life's challenges that you might only get with age, that they're able to reflect back on the podcast and take something away from it.
Definitely.